boxing is next. Charlene Hunter-Gauld is the referee in charge. Charlene?
The call to ban boxing is not new, but within the last month, new studies showing that 87% of boxers involved suffered some degree of brain damage prompted the American Medical Association to renew its call to ban the sport. Adding fuel to the AMA's plea, the very next day, a blue ribbon commission appointed by New Jersey Governor Thomas Kean called for outlawing boxing in that state. Calling boxing legal savagery, the commission said it has no place in a civilized culture. We get further background information on the State Commission of Investigation report from David Schrottweiser of the New Jersey Nightly News.
The SCI's 2.5-year investigation of the fight game reached a startling conclusion.
The bottom line of the report is the Commission's recommendation that that professional boxing be prohibited in New Jersey for a number of reasons.
According to the SCI, those reasons include a growing body of medical evidence that shows boxing poses significant physical danger to fighters. In the past, both the American Medical Association and the British Medical Association have called for the abolition of the sport. Now comes the SCI's report documenting organized crime's intrusion into the ring in New Jersey.
It's a level of involvement which, if existed in any other sport, would be a major public scandal.
According to the SCI, there's no evidence of fixed fights or organized crime-backed fighters, but there is evidence of the mob's intrusion in boxing at every level, from promoters to trainers. The reputed mobsters linked to the fight game by the SCI include Lucchese crime family member Michael the Fat Kid Tessetta, John DiGilio of the Genovese crime family, and South Jersey's own Nicodemo Little Nicky Scarfo, boss of the powerful Bruno crime family.
You get those kinds of people involved, and you get the gambling issue involved. You face the problem of fixing the fights. There has to be a public confidence in a fight and in a fighter. And the integrity of the system is at issue.
To preserve that integrity, the SCI also recommended alternatives in case the state does not ban boxing. Those alternatives include background checks on all promoters and trainers, stronger enforcement of licensing requirements, no blows above the shoulders during matches, a requirement that all fighters wear headgear, and the use of safer boxing gloves.
Here with us to elaborate on the report is one of the 4 commission members, James Zazzali, the former Attorney General of New Jersey. And here to respond is a man closely associated with professional boxing, both as a former world heavyweight champion and former member of the New York State Athletic Commission, Floyd Patterson. First to you, Mr. Zazzali, the organized crime allegations, exactly what are the linkages there?
Well, what we've done, and the report speaks for itself, is to state and conclude that there is an organized crime presence at every level, at the level of managers, promoters, and at the trainer level, and indeed with some of the boxers themselves. Understand, we're not saying that boxing is controlled by organized crime in New Jersey or in any other state. We are simply saying that there's a presence, that there's an intrusion, and that this influence is a pervasive influence. And nor are we saying that all boxers, managers, trainers, or promoters are controlled.
But when you say organized crime involvement with the boxers themselves, I mean, like doing what?
Well, for example, we believe that some of the boxers, and we found evidence to suggest that some boxers are bankrolled by organized crime interest. In a word, that some boxers are in a situation where organized crime figures have a piece of those boxers.
All right. But as you know, I mean, there are similar allegations about casinos, about unions, that there's organized crime involvement. Why are you going after boxing and not after those? I mean, what's the difference?
Fair question. I suppose if we carried our logic to its logical conclusion, we should suggest that the garbage industry be banned, just as an example. I think the pivotal factor, and as our report states, we're concerned about the extensive evidence of brain damage, of mental and physical injuries to boxers. Speaking only for myself, I don't know if the organized crime presence and influence would have been enough to persuade me that we should recommend a ban on boxing. I think combined with the medical evidence, the overwhelming medical evidence from the American Medical Association, the British Medical, and the Australian Medical Associations, here in New York, the New York Medical Society, the American Academy of Pediatrics, all of them have urged strongly that based on the data, we should abolish boxing. And as one report indicated earlier this evening, one AMA test indicated that 87% of the boxers testified showed chronic brain disease. Now, the AMA is not a bunch of wild-eyed, starry-eyed liberals looking to remake the world. They're our nation's physicians, and the American Pediatric Society said that we have 15,000 young people out there actively engaged in boxing, and many thousands of those youths of our nation are going to be injured.
All right, let me go to you, Mr. Patterson. First, on the organized crime allegations, is it your sense that there's enough of an involvement by organized crime to justify the banning, or even partly justify the banning of boxing?
Well, let me put it this way. I've known a lot of fighters. I've been around a lot of fighters. I've been around fighters all my life. And I know many of them personally. And I don't ever recall, although there is some linked in boxing, just as there is other sports, and probably more in other sports than boxing, but it's nowhere near that amount. Back in 1950, in the mid-50s, I believe the Kafafa Committee got rid of, there was a lot of crime in boxing then, but I believe they got rid of most. Yes, got rid of quite a bit of it. And I don't think, there is some in, but I don't think it's nowhere near the amount that you think might be there.
All right, I want to get to the second point Mr. Zazali raised about the actual injuries, but let me just go back and see, you know, how you argue against what Mr. Patterson has just said, that there's really not any significant evidence to cause that kind of worry that you've articulated. Well, let me just...
Well, as anything else, it's a question of degree. We think there was substantial evidence in New Jersey of the organized crime influence. Indeed, if this were basketball, we would have a national scandal. Senator Kefauver and Senator McClellan and Senator McCarthy would probably all be resurrected to investigate the problem.
But this is not something you know.
Well, I'm around boxing. I'm in the dressing room. I'm at the ringside. I'm at the physical examinations. I'm everywhere. And I'm trying to figure out how people can see it from their office, and I'm right there, and I don't see it. See, I'm trying to get the difference in that. Or maybe they have something I don't know that's there. Maybe they have some sort of TV behind the curtain or something. I don't see it.
I think that speaks well for Floyd. He has an excellent reputation. It's well-deserved, and he did not come under the influence of organized crime factors, but that influence is there. I emphasize, though, it's not just one factor. It's the organized crime issue combined with the medical evidence of brain damage.
All right, what about that medical evidence of brain damage and other injuries, including death, I believe?
Well, let me put it this way. I have boxed for some 22 years. I've had a lot of amateur fights, maybe 60, 70, or 80, a lot of professional fights. I've been hit. Some I've been down. Ingemar Johansson knocked me down 7 times before the referee stopped the fight. I've been hit quite a few times. So what I'm trying to say is that if I have brain damage right now, and I've been retired for 13 years, I wish brain damage on all of my friends.
But
I have never thought so sharply. And I'm around fighters quite a bit. I do see some fighters, every now and then an occasional fighter might talk a bit funny, but he may have been talking funny before he came into boxing.
But what about these studies that show that 87% of the ones involved in the study have some kind of brain damage and other American Medical Association evidence?
Okay, that's might be so, but let me say this about that. Based on statistics, boxing is ranked number 8 as far as deaths are concerned. There are 7 other sports in front of boxing: football, speed car racing, parachuters, and some more. So what I'm trying to say is that, have they checked the brain of these people to find out how many of those? It might be 99%, or maybe even all 100%. I don't know. Check them and compare.
And you're saying boxing is safer?
I say, well, based on statistics, let's go by statistics.
All right, let's, Mr. Zazali.
Having only taken 2 boxing lessons at Georgetown 25 years ago, I'm a bit less experienced than Floyd, but my reaction is otherwise. It seems to me that the primary purpose is to inflict serious injury, whether it's by a knockout or by virtue of points. In any event, our goal here is that is the goal of the SCI in making this recommendation, was to come to grips with a problem where the chronic brain disease is overwhelming. I don't think that's the case in football or in any of the other sports we've been talking about.
And your first recommendation is to ban the sport. Now, your reaction to that is what?
Well, I can only say what boxing did for me. Had it not been for boxing, I would be speaking to whoever listened to me from behind bars. I started out from the slums. And if you check, you'll find that most fighters that made it on to become champions or way up there all came from the slums. So I think it's, I just don't particularly care. You did go to college, right? I wish I did, but I didn't. Anyway, to get back to what I was saying, I just can't see, like the American Medical Association made the decision laying on the beach in Hawaii to ban boxing, which is helping someone get out of the slums. My mother and father live in Mount Vernon now. I live comfortably now. I wouldn't be here speaking with you had it not been for boxing. So I'm not saying don't take boxing away from them. Attempt to make it safer.
All right, what's
and
your
at the same time, remember, make the other 7 sports safer too. Because,
all right, but your concern is with boxing. So what's your reaction to that point, that you know, boxing has been a way out for a lot of poor kids?
I think the answer is twofold. First, the good news is that we have a Floyd Patterson. He's been a magnificent role model. The bad news is that for every Floyd Patterson, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of kids, disadvantaged youths who simply have not made it. The suggestion by some others that boxing is a finishing school for ghetto youths is simply not so. The second problem that I have with the argument is that even though there are a few success stories, the price we've paid for that in terms of chronic brain disease being suffered by thousands of young people and now old people is too high a price to pay because we have 2 or 3 success stories. Now, Rambo is a myth, Rocky is a myth, Sylvester Stallone may not be a myth, but Rambo and Rocky are myths.
All right, but let me just get back to this then, Mr. Patterson. What about the recommendations, short of banning, the recommendations that we heard about, not to hit above the shoulder and the other things outlined in the tape piece earlier? Would you buy those?
No, I think that would kill boxing.
Why?
You said no hitting above the neck. Is that right? This means no head blows, strictly body. I don't know whether or not the interest would remain the same then. I don't think it would. I think it'd leave it just as
is. That what you're trying to do, kill boxing?
You could make it a bit safer.
Not at all, in the sense that we've made an alternative recommendation. We're in favor of the ban. I think we're also realistic. The ban or the abolition may or may not pass the New Jersey legislature. In the alternative, and we said this in the report, we urge the legislature to adopt reforms. One of them would be the wearing of headgear. As I understand, that's done in some phases of the sport, whether it's the Olympics or amateur boxing.
You have a problem with that, wearing headgear?
No, I have no problem with that, but there's one point that I would like to bring out. He said abolish boxing because of all the suffering. Who suffers? The fighter. See? So what I'm saying is if a fighter is still willing to fight based on whatever suffering there is involved in it, there must be a hell of a good reason why. And also one more thing, if you check statistics, as I said, check all of the guys that were successful, that made it to the top, that took boxing above and beyond what it really is, were all from the ghettos.
All right, well, I can see we're not going to solve this tonight, so we'll be watching with interest what happens in New Jersey. Thank you both, Mr. Zzelli and Mr. Patterson.
Thank you.
Thank you.